How's it going, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Pieces of the Nation. Today, I have a very special guest. You want to be called special guest?
Why not?
It's funny because we talked a little bit, and I was trying to figure out how I could introduce her, and she was kind enough to say, "I trust you. Just introduce me however you want." So I am just going to go introduce this young lady here. Her name is Zoey Rose. Say hi, Zoey.
Hello.
So Zoey and I have known each other for, like 10 years?
About 10 years.
About 10 years. Zoey here is, she's in the film business. She's also a part-time comedian. Would you say comedian?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah? She's kind of funny.
No, not at all.
And she's got a little bit of OCD. Just to give you a little bit of context, we're sitting in this room, and there's a library with all these books, and they're all color coordinated. And what did you want to do with this, Zoey?
Put it a little bit more like the same height,
Yeah.
and maybe color code it. I don't know. It's just, I like the color coding, but it's just a little sloppy.
A little sloppy. Don't tell Missy that, because she actually color coordinated this. Oh, you didn't? Okay.
Well, it's just that if it was more, I don't know. It's the levels are all off everywhere.
You would have liked to level things out a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
I had a life of controlled chaos, so that's where my OCD comes from. It's not as bad as it was, but now it's a little better, but it's still there.
Okay. Good to know. Duly noted. So the reason why I brought up Zoey on this podcast is she is a transgender, right? And just saying transgender, because I always like correcting people on this, even though. Please.
You don't just say transgender because it's an adjective. It's a modifier. So trans woman, or on the opposite end, somebody would be a trans man. Because somebody is not just transgender.
Right.
You can shorten it and say somebody's trans or a trans person or a trans individual, but transgender on their own is fine. But I only say that because if I don't correct, people in the community that might hear this would attack me for not correcting that. So I'm a little less of a stickler on it. So.
Right. Okay. Dude, that's awesome, because I'm obviously completely naive on all the terms.
It's okay.
This is partially why this podcast is here, is because so I can learn. Right? Is it possible to say transformer? This is based off your Facebook.
Yes, on my Facebook post about the person that said we are creating a new species that might be part robot. And I wish I was part robot. That would be awesome.
That'd be so great.
Yeah, and instead of making a dad joke, I make trans mom jokes. So,
exactly. So trans woman.
Trans woman.
Trans lady.
Trans lady.
Okay.
Trans female.
Trans female?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so...
But in a way, yes, I am trans. I am transgender. But it's just the modifier of it all. It should have another word.
Got it. Thank you.
And hence why my voice is so deep.
Which is another... we're going to segue into something after a bit. But so just to give a little bit of context and history, we've known each other for a while. And do you want to bring up your past name?
Yeah, I have no problem hiding that. My past name was Zach, or Zachary.
Okay.
Over the years, since I've known I was trans since a little child, but I kept it hidden. Like, there was always so many different female names, but when I decided to finally transition, I kept my initials. So, so I figured since my parents named me something, I might as well still honor them of that.
Dude, that's so great. So great. So you know what? We're just going to flash forward a little bit.
Well, I'm going to also add in, though, Zoey means life.
Okay.
And when I decided not to kill myself into transition that night, and I realized that night Zoey meant life, I was like, it's perfect.
Does it really? Zoey means life.
In Greek.
Huh. So it's like a living rose. Mm-hmm. Wow, I love that.
Blossoming life.
Blossoming life.
Because roses bloom.
You're literally and technically going to, or are blooming.
Yes, I'm trying to.
Yeah. Okay.
Little wilted in some places, but that's a conversation we'll probably get to.
Yeah, we'll get there. But okay, I sort of wanted to talk about our background, but you know what? That doesn't really matter. What I'm really fascinated about, and I know we talked about this slightly, but what I'm really fascinated about is the moment you had realized, or the moments that you realized that led up to the moment to make that decision. What moment was that? Number one, and number two, what was going on through your mind?
There was multiple points throughout my life. So you want me to talk about the time where I actually finally decided to move forward?
I want you to talk about that initial shift in your head.
Well, the biggest initial shift was puberty. Like at that point, it became a thing of like, not just talking about when I was younger, and as more is coming up, like things are being remembered from the past by my sister, my parents, whatever. On that, there were signs there, and then there was a time when I was like 6 that I was shamed for female things, even though I was at that point living as a boy. But I learned to suppress it. There was other issues within my household that I learned to suppress a lot of feelings. I learned to placate. But then when I hit puberty and the voice started dropping, the more male characteristics started coming out, the first hair on my face, the first hair on my chest, like all that was that was the start of the dysphoria, the gender dysphoria, where the incongruency of the body I had versus the brain I had. And then once testosterone becomes so strong in you in puberty, it's like your brain is constantly yelling at you that something's wrong, that something's not right. And that around 12, almost 13, it was sometime in 7th grade, that was the first suicide attempt. I stupidly, anybody that wants to figure out how to kill themselves, but stupidly, internet didn't really exist back then, so I didn't know which way I was supposed to slice my wrist. And yes, I know, laughing about suicide, I can laugh at that past pain. I have no problem with that. But nobody knew that pain. Nobody knew that struggle. And then after that, it was just like, I'm trapped in this. Oops, sorry about a little burp there. So
it's so
lady.
Good. It'll be 100 times louder on this mic.
So ladylike. So I kind of pushed it all down, and also because at that point, the only real way of seeing trans women was on things like Maury Povich. That was before Jerry Springer, and he would always have the ones where he'd be like, is this a man or was this a woman as they were born? And they were kind of paraded out as freaks in a way, even though back then, and I was just like, that's not me. I'm a boy, I'm a man, whatever. And I was good at suppressing it, even though there was some feelings there. And it wasn't until my first love, losing virginity, that then dysphoria, hyperdrive. I feel bad. I'll laugh about this now. But anytime we would have sex, either right before it or right afterwards, I would throw up. And how that must have felt for the girl I was dating at that time. Because if you could only imagine, I could only imagine if I was with somebody and we're getting ready and foreplay or whatever, and then like, if they had to run off to throw up, I'd be like, what the hell is wrong with me?
Right. And this happened often.
Yes, this happened often. But afterwards, like shortly after that, as that relationship fell apart, that was the second suicide attempt. 17. I knew more what was wrong with me, but when I was in the mental hospital, because I was actually on a 5150 hold for 72-hour hold in a mental facility. For those that don't know what a 5150 is, I explained a lot of my hate for my body, but I never said, like, I've always felt like I was supposed to be a girl or I was supposed to be a woman, because when you're 17, you're graduating in 2 months from high school. You don't want to sit there and say, I think I'm a woman, because then what if they hold me even longer in the mental hospital? So I still kept that to the grave. Nobody knew. Living life, I got better, was put on some antidepressants. They helped for a while. until they didn't. Fell in love with the next girl who completely changed my life.
This is after high school.
This is after high school.
So let's hold that thought real quick, because I had a couple questions.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. So from the time you realized this all the way up to high school, right? What was that? You know, it really intrigues me, because the reason why I'm asking this question, right, is we all go through growing pains and shifts and self-identity issues, right? Me being Asian, I had a lot of self-identity issues. For a long time, I really wanted to have blonde hair and blue eyes. It's kind of fucked up.
It's kind of what the norm is of what they sell is what is attractive.
Right. For a long time, I did not want to go to Taiwan, because I just thought Taiwan was stuck in the 70s or 80s, right? And to visit my home country. So I understand that level of struggle within my heart and my soul. When you were struggling through that, obviously there were I can only imagine there were multiples, right? There was you going through a growing pain, right? And you trying to figure out your self-identity. What was that like?
It was a constant conflict. It was a constant, like I said, my brain was constantly screaming that something is not right, that you're constantly living in that. But I became so good at suppressing it, where I could suppress it at times. And then I would be numb to it. I was disassociating from it, to use a like a clinical term for it. I really would disassociate from those feelings, and I really learned to numb my feelings. Also around 8th grade is when my food addiction started, to compulsively overeat, because since I couldn't tell anybody, that would be the way where, oh, well, this comforts me. Let me eat until I'm just uncomfortable, till I'm so full that made the other pain go away. And that would work for a moment. Then it would be so suppressed, I could go on for a while, then all comes rushing back. Cycle over and over. And then every time it came back harder, stronger on there.
Wow.
When you're seeing people socializing the way that you feel you should have that socialization, that I shouldn't have been forced into all the boy stuff. And I get that that's societal creation of gender stereotypes. Had I hung out with more girls and being at that time, let's say back in junior high, that was the early 90s. Oh, you would have been queer, fag, whatever. I don't know what we're allowed to say on here, what the word language is. Okay.
Shit, fuck.
Yeah. So at that time though, being in the Central Valley of California, very conservative area, you just couldn't be different. So I did everything I could to just fit in and nobody would know. Plus also too, even at that point, and without internet being around to do a lot of research, it's like, why do I feel this way, but I'm also only attracted to women?
How did you release that? How did you find ways to cope with it, aside from taking...
The biggest way was actually, even though the internet didn't really exist then, there was local BBSs at that time, bulletin board systems, which were like localized versions of an internet. I had my female persona on there. I had my regular username, and then I had my female persona username. And it allowed me to live that life in secret. I wrote a lot. I read a lot. So it was a lot of escapism, but it was within isolation that I could do that nobody knew. Nobody knew what I was struggling with on there. Wow. And that's bringing back to the OCD.
Right, absolutely.
That's why the OCD was so bad.
So wait, so how does that relate to the OCD exactly?
Well, because the OCD, I always made sure that everything was prim, proper. I didn't want anybody to see anything in my life being askew, because, oh, maybe they'd see that, and then that's wrong. That, oh, there's something wrong with Zach at that point. So I made everything perfect. I made everything light. And like I said, my books would all be all lined up based on their height. Anything just to not have people look into my life in which way more.
So you created this Zach facade in a way, or
well, in a way, it's what I had to do to be seen as normal and not be, at that point it would have been a freak. It's like, it's amazing, and it's something we'll get into probably later, of like how much my hometown has changed.
Yeah.
How I know somebody that's 11 years old and has socially transitioned in my hometown. Like, amazing. Like, from 92 to now, it's like, holy shit. Yeah. But back then, because there wasn't the knowledge of it all.
Right.
So you just had to do whatever you could to cope. And I did.
Wow.
And lived in a lot of depression. But
sure, I can imagine, but I think you just said something where, human beings find certain ways to cope, and whatever it takes to cope to feel better, right? Completely adaptable, right? So let's flash forward. Before I stopped you said something that about a girl that completely changed your life.
Well, yeah, it was the most honest I ever was. I fell in love with her. She was great. I could have seen her as marrying her. She knew a little bit about the dressing, but not completely everything, and she was okay with that. And well, she said she was cool with it. Who knows? Right, but who knows what young dumb people?
We'll get her on the phone right now. Call her right now.
No, she was wonderful. She was great. She was accepting. She adored me, and I ended up breaking her heart in the long run because I kept pushing her more and more away. But I still wanted to like make it official. I wanted to propose to her, and kind of our last Christmas kind of together, because I was already kind of pushing her apart. I went and I was going to buy a ring, and I was going to propose. I was going to make it official. Wow. And every day for a couple days. And since it's the Central Valley, I would wait outside the mall because that's where everybody in the Central Valley goes to buy their rings, is the mall. Yeah.
What's a mall again?
What's a mall? I know, exactly. And I just couldn't do it. And then it became Christmas Eve, and I'm like, it's now or never. It's now or never. I finally walked in. And of course it's busy because all the men that wait till the last minute to buy their loved ones a gift. And I'm just waiting. I'm right by the rings. I'm looking at it. I'm deciding. But in my head, I'm just like, this is huge. Like, I know I suppress things, but I know it keeps coming back. I know even with her, it would come back and it would come and go. And I would suppress it just because of my love for her. And then finally, a guy comes up that's ready to help me. Hey, how can I help you? Oh, I want to buy those earrings over there. It's exactly where my brain went. It was my coping mechanism. It was my way of saying, I can't propose to her because I'm not honest with her at that moment. And then from there, I even pushed her away even further. I became a dick because I just couldn't share that with her because I couldn't even completely be honest with myself. It's great, though. She's married. She has a wonderful husband, has 2 wonderful kids now. We're still in contact, but yeah, I had to push her away from that. And then shortly after that, once I knew she moved on and started dating the guy that ended up becoming her husband, that's when I finally moved down to LA, because I was just like, I need to get away from here. I need to get on my own. I need to take this shot at the film industry. I need to do all this. And it allowed me to kind of explore more too. But still not come out for a while. Continue in this long way of getting to the answer of your question, towards the end of 2008, I was researching therapists and stuff, doing a lot of research on places that are kind of not the greatest on there because they're a little outdated in a lot of their stuff. But I was doing research. I was really looking into it. I knew about the hormones. I knew about the blockers. And then when the 2008 election happened in California, for the Californians that know, there was Prop 8. My parents loved them, but they voted yes on Prop 8 to make marriage only between a man and a woman. And at that point, I was sitting there going, I'm only attracted to women. If I did transition, they're basically saying no to their child. They don't know this, but they're saying no to their child. And I get their reasoning why they voted that way. No ill will towards them. But then I just suppressed it again. And I suppressed it hardcore. I suppressed it not just in food, but in alcohol. And really ballooned up in my weight because it was just so depressing to go back and be like, as I was finally moving forward, as I was finally accepting myself, even though still nobody knew, I suppressed it. I even, from somebody I knew online forever, like shortly after this, she's like, hey, we're great for each other. Let's get married. We almost got married in February of 2009 because we just known each other forever. And we're still involved too. She has a wonderful husband. I guess all the girls that date me have wonderful husbands. Guess I'm a good luck charm. But that was also me trying to run away and being like,
right.
You're a man, be a man. That's what you have to be. That's the cards you were dealt.
It's kind of fucked up, right?
Yeah.
That whole mentality, right? That you can't cry, you can't be emotional. You essentially just have to be completely stoic.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And because I'd built up so many walls of protection, it's like I had no feeling. I was so numb. I was nothing. I was just a shell going through life.
We were already friends by this point.
Yes, we were. Yeah.
Okay.
And then from there, I got really good at suppressing it. It just would still come around in cycles. And then it wasn't until 2014 when I met Kim Petras. She's a musician. We were looking to develop her as an artist. She's a German young pop star. And we had a meeting with her, and then as she left, my boss was like, do you know her story? I was like, no. And he's like, go look her up. Very first thing, trans woman. Like, I didn't even know she was a trans woman because she was only 21. She might not even have been 21 at that point. But she started hormones at 12. She never had the male puberty. And she, at that point, at 16, was the youngest person to get gender confirmation surgery. So at that point, I was just like, I waited too long. And it made the depression worse. It made the cycle worse. And I don't know if you remember, that's like when I had the big old beard going on after that. I just was like, I'm a man. Sorry, you'll have to deal with it. Also, another excuse why the beard was so big, because I hated watching myself in the mirror. And to shave, you had to look in the mirror.
Right.
And then cut to close to, it was August of 2016, to get to the final answer of this long-winded way to get to your answer. I was so deep in dysphoria. I was just so messed up. I was trying to lose weight, just finding anything. How can I get happier? What can I do? I was on this long plateau. And then I was helping a friend shoot the World Series of beach volleyball down in Long Beach for 2 days. And on the second day, surrounded by beautiful people, especially beach volleyball players, those bodies are amazing. Something in my head told me, no matter how much weight you lose, you'll never have the body you want. And it broke me. It crushed me because it was like, it's right. It's like, when I go home, I'm going to have my final meal, because as a food addict, you got to have a final meal of, what was it? Yeah. And I didn't even give myself a good final meal. It was a DiGiorno pizza.
Oh, come on.
And at least I spent for the Ben & Jerry's pint of ice cream.
Come on. You could have at least like forked out like, what is it? I can't even think right now, but DiGiorno pizza. Like, yeah. I mean, you could have ordered in.
I could have,
right?
But I mean, $5.50 for the pizza. Come on. So on my whole way home, I had every intention that night of taking my life. August 27th, 2016. And drove home. I'm like a little bit of crying. I'm eating my pizza, it was as the pizza was cooking. For whatever reason, I never Googled it before. I did so much research, but I searched transgender inspiration. And I saw a video that popped up by Sona Avedian, I think is how you pronounce it. I probably butchered her name. And here was the still picture of a video she did that showed herself as a depressed, hairy, bigger man. and to the right of it was as a beautiful woman. And I was just like, holy shit, there's a possibility. And I watched her video, like all 9 minutes of it, and I saw her story was so much like mine. Even though there's a lot of differences, she went into the military to hide and to be her manly. That was her escape. It was like, if I go, if I die. And that's the same thing with so many transgender people that are in the military. And with this whole transgender military ban, they go there because they don't care if they die. But once she started transitioning, you saw her change. You saw her go from being miserable and sad to finally having smiles that didn't feel forced, didn't feel faked. And she looked beautiful. And at that point, I just broke down crying. I watched it again. And I cried some more. And then I ate my pizza because I had to. Can't waste food as a food addict.
I was a fly on the wall. That juxtaposition of thoughts right now that I'm going through.
But then the nice thing with YouTube, though, is they have all these, like, if you watch this, like, similar videos. And then I realized there was a playlist of 100-something, what they refer to as transgender timelines. And for the next 3 hours, that's all I watched. And well, everybody's story is a little different. One thing I always noticed, there was a point in everybody's transition that shared it where their eyes became alive again.
Right.
That there was a spark and a joy there. And I said, that's what I want.
Wow.
I shaved half of my beard. I posted a picture because it's social media. You gotta...
Wait. You shaved half of your beard on one side of the face?
On one side of the face. I shaved my beard. And I took a picture and I said, changes are coming. Because I was like, if these people could share it so publicly, I'm going to share it so publicly. Plus, if I put it out there, I can't go back into hiding anymore.
The master of foreshadowing.
Yeah, and of course, one person's like, what'd you find a new lipstick? And I'm like, oh shit, she knows.
She knows.
She knows. But the very next day, I called my insurance and I said, what mental health coverage do I have? The woman was very nice, was like, and you're not going to harm yourself? I'm like, no, this is the opposite of that. And found a great therapist in West Hollywood. Even though he had listed as gender issues on his specialties, I was his first trans client. So we both learned a lot. But the first night I met him, that was the first time I ever said out loud that I'm transgender. I waited till the last 5 minutes of the session. I covered everything else in my life first.
Right.
And then as soon as I said that, I just started crying. And thanks to my Fitbit watch, that night is the best night I've slept in all my time of tracking my sleep.
Wow.
I wasn't waking up. I slept for a good almost 9 hours that night, uninterrupted.
How much did you usually sleep?
It's broken up a lot. But it's anywhere 5 to 7 hours, but there's always at least once I wake up every night. And I toss and turn a lot, but that night it was just whatever that I carried for so long was finally off my shoulders, and I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
And then it all became scary again. But.
Yeah, of course. I think this is the moment. This is the time where we actually started the interview video version of this, right?
No, this was before, because this was August of 2016, so it was before the election. And then my therapist, we were finally going to start talking like the day before the election. He was like, next week we'll talk about exploring what your options are for hormones. Yeah. And I was like, oh, thank God, and then the next day when President Trump won, I was like, fuck, this is not right at all. Because even if he's not in office, Pence is in office, and it's like, this is the worst thing. Why would I do this? I should just go back. Right. But thankfully, two of my friends, one that is a big inspiration to me because she's been battling cancer for years, that she's just like, no, you have to give her your shot. So, but yeah, for that moment, like, Monday it's like, hey, let's talk hormones, and then Tuesday it's like, oh, we just got set back as a country. But yeah, you didn't know until a little bit after we started recording, because we started recording what in that would have been
October, November.
Did we start before he took office? I guess we did. I think maybe November or December.
Maybe November, December. Yeah. You know why? Because January 20th was his inauguration, right? And we had to prep at least 2 to 3 interviews, right?
Correct.
For that sort of launch, and I think we even might have missed it.
I think we did miss it.
Yeah. I think we did miss it. I mean, I remember shooting out a sort of introductory video, but I think we did miss like the first 2 weeks of his presidency.
Yeah,
because we were so hectic at the time.
It was hectic. We were all going through a lot. It was a bit mourning. We're over halfway done. The plus side is whenever they talk about how long he's been in office, I can just subtract 3 days, and that's how long I've been on hormones.
Perfect.
I started 3 days after he took office because I wasn't going to let him win.
Right.
At that point, that's where I got to, at least.
So I know we talked about this too before, because one of Zoe's videos was on the piece, first introduction, right? Would you call it a confession in a way?
It was. I recorded it 5 weeks in on hormones, even though I knew it wasn't going to come out for a bit. Partially because there was one less person I had to tell in person, which was the girl's heart that I broke back then, because she still didn't know. A lot of my friends had known, my family had known by then, but it was also my social coming out. There was many people that knew I was going through something, but not knowing what. But yeah, it was kind of my feeling of that night, of how I felt like the country was moving forward, then all of a sudden it felt such a step back, that it was such an administration that wanted to take away LGBT rights. And to me, yes, I'm a trans woman, but more importantly, I'm human. That's what I came to, and that was...
Exactly.
We're human. Like, I would not wish being trans or gender dysphoria on even my worst enemy, because it sucks. I broke down last night over some bullshit.
Really? Like what?
There was a bit of dysphoria. There was a bit of whole, like, slamming on of things of trans woman that I know that online, haven't met in person, that went in for her surgery and is now brain dead. She probably will never, they're probably going to pull her off life support in the next day or two, because whatever one she was under, not enough oxygen to the brain or something, and she went in to go get her vagina, and now she's never going to have that. Another trans friend is self-harming. I had a support group, and it was very dark of stuff that was being shared, and so it's just a whole bunch of stuff that just piled on. And
right.
I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? Why can't I just be normal? Why couldn't I have been born a cis woman? Or why couldn't I've been born a man but without the dysphoria? And it sucks sometimes.
I mean,
sorry we're getting so heavy.
No, this is great. This is actually perfect. But I mean, those questions of like, why am I here? What's my purpose on this planet? Is highly essential, I think, right? Because we're all different, and some of us know why we're here immediately, and some of us have to find out 40, 50, 60 years later, right? But I believe that when that time hits, it'll just hit, right? It'll just show itself and say, I'm right here. Now the question is, how do you take that truth? It's because essentially it's the truth. It's right in your face. Are we going to be scared of it, or are we going to embrace it? It sounds like when this moment hit you, when this realization hits you, you embraced it. right?
Finally, yeah.
It took you,
instead of multiple times of.
But you were searching for it, right? It's just like the coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
You were searching for it. Of course, yeah. You know, you were eating your DiGiorno pizza, right?
Yep.
Right.
And Ben and Jerry's ice cream.
Yeah, Ben and Jerry's ice cream. It was going to be your last meal. And by the way, everyone, I'm not laughing like
no, it's kind of funny because it's DiGiorno.
Yeah, I know.
Treat yourself if you're.
It's hilarious, right? But
I mean, if I was on death row, is that what I would have ordered for my last meal? No,
I know, right?
I would have ordered 3 DiGiorno pizzas.
But you know, you're in that moment, and you still felt like you had something to search for, that glimmer of light of hope, right? And you found it.
I did, but it's interesting because at that point, my mind was, and it's something that my therapist called me out on, was at that point I realized I would rather have because what brought me to there was I'll never have the body I want. I'll never have that smaller framed hips, smaller shoulders, smaller face, all that, smaller hands. I'll never have any of that female size figure. Yes, I know there's women of all shapes and sizes.
I call it petitism.
Yes. That I went with, I would rather have the imperfect female body than the perfect male body. And because of how deep and dark I was at that moment, it was like, well, if that also doesn't work out, I can still kill myself. There's a reason why the trans suicide attempted rate that's reported, that attempted doesn't necessarily mean they are successful with it, is 41%. The more accepting family and friends around them, that lower that is. But considering I lived in...
One second, folks.
Sorry, phone call.
Zoey is checking his
phone call for
Apple Watch.
Wait, did you say his Apple Watch?
Did I say his Apple Watch?
It's okay. I don't care. It happens sometimes. No,
Freudian slip.
It's okay. You knew me as male longer than you know me as female.
What still kind of like goes through my mind, because sometimes, seriously, Misty catches me all the time, and she goes, no, really, I have to explain this, but Misty catches me all the time, and she'll stare at me. I go, what?
You might not have said that too, so maybe I'm projecting. I don't know.
I don't know. Whatever happened, the proof is in the pudding on this.
No, it's funny. It's my cousin. It's one of the last people I talked to for a long time, right after my video came out. He was one of the first people to call me, and it's weird that he's calling me right now.
By the way, I apologize. If I did, I'm going to just apologize right now.
I don't care. And it's also knowing the voice, the brain picks up male on that. And I get that. And I'm totally fine with, I mean, when I came out, my voice was more like this, and this isn't even as deep if you go back and listen to my coming out video. And I don't want to go too high because then I sound like Mickey Mouse. It's tough. I'm working on the voice. It's so
just be
tough.
You, Zoe.
I
just
know.
be you.
So what was the question again?
I don't know. I don't remember what the question was. Yeah, all I remember is DiGiorno pizza.
Yes, DiGiorno pizza.
Yeah. You know what? Let's scrap that question. I don't even remember the question.
Oh no! I was talking about the imperfect body. That I'd rather have the imperfect female body than the perfect male body, and
right.
that's where my brain went to after that.
That's
where I went, and then my therapist, when I told them that, like, that's where I came to that night. There was like, well, what's the perfect male or female body? I was like, oh, exactly. It's going back to you with the blonde hair and blue eyes.
Right.
Why is that supposedly the ideal reflection of what people are supposed to be?
Right. You know, it's fucked up in a way, because I'm not really sure how many other people deal with this sort of thing, but trying to find yourself, and I still have essences of that where I'm still trying to find myself. Maybe it's because I'm an extremely creative person. Who knows? Maybe it's because I always want to become a better person, right? Or maybe it's because I want to be able to bring difference in the world that I'm living in, right? Mm-hmm. I recently did some research on depression, anxiety, being overwhelmed, right? And I came up with the term, but looked up a term called maladaptive daydreamer. And what a maladaptive daydreamer is a person that has experienced heavy trauma at a young age. And I thought, holy shit, this is what I'm going through. And all the symptoms are pretty on point. Like I had a fear of, for a long time, I had a fear of not, like, moving in a way, right? So basically what happens, you get caught up in this world in your head, and you think this is the greatest, like, idea in the world, this is the greatest mission in the world, adventure in the world, but you don't move, right? You don't take movements or actions towards it. And I've had so many fantasies and dreams of this life I want, but the fear of moving towards that crippled me, right?
I, as a creative person, I totally get that.
Right. So that's the question. Like, is it because I experienced that, and now I'm a creative? I needed a way to
An outlet for it.
Yeah,
maybe?
exactly. So so that's what I realized that I have that behavior, the maladaptive behavior. For you, would you say you experienced trauma, or it was more sort of suppression?
It was a mixture of both. I grew up in a little bit of a chaotic household. And I mean, my dad was an alcoholic, recovered now. And my mom had an undiagnosed mental illness at that time, which we now find out is bipolar 1. So I never knew what type of parent I was going to get. So besides the suppression, it was also placating. I grew up placating, where it was just like when you asked me, oh, where do you want to sit? And I was just like, wherever. That's my placatiness. It's still there. Friend last night, where do you want to go to dinner? Oh, you choose. Wow. Because I never wanted to be the one to, like, push for things, because if I pushed for something, they didn't like that. Who knows how it would have turned out? They were never physically abusive, but it was just my way of coping. That's why I disappeared into movies and books at such a young age. It escaped from the reality of what life could have been. So yeah, not exactly the same, but that is my trauma of growing up in that, of having that secret, hiding that secret, and then just a little bit of the chaotic of that family lifestyle.
I mean, there's definitely a similarity, because if you're growing up and you're trying to be the best person or the best kid you can, just to express yourself, and you find it hard to express yourself. Through this experience thus far, what do you feel like helps you to break through those moments when you feel it coming on?
It's as my endocrinologist, when I finally got approved to start hormones, like she told me, she's like, you're going to feel many new feelings, many new emotions, just lean into it. And so that's what I do now. Is what I was feeling last night, I just leaned into it. I probably cried for 2-3 hours last night, and I let that emotion out. I talked about it with people. I didn't just bottle it up anymore. I didn't build up that pressure keg. I constantly am letting that valve stem out, so it never gets so much and so overwhelming. Just probably because there was so much yesterday. That's why it became so overwhelming to me. And that's part of what's been great, is sharing this whole journey online. It's become my outlet. I don't sugarcoat it, because transition is not easy. I'm lucky my parents are still in my life. I didn't lose my job. I didn't lose any friends. That's not the norm. It's a little bit of survivor's guilt. So I have to carry that too, where I'm like, why do I have it so good compared to other people? So I try to think about stuff like that. I try to, anything that just gets me through it. Anybody that wants to attack me for being trans, I don't affect your life in any way. You can think about me whatever you want. You can call me mentally ill. You can call me a man. That's your choice. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Happier than I've ever been. Yeah, there's still downsides, but holy shit, am I happy? Like, that's the main thing. Feel great in that. Going to your thing about like holding back, like, do we hold ourselves back? Yes, I'm still holding myself back on certain things. Holding myself back as a writer, holding myself back as a creative, because now that I can be so more authentic in it, it's like, well, now if I get rejected, they're rejecting the real me. They're not rejecting this fake version of me that I'm presenting.
So what about that? What about this experience is helping you to really be live the highest potential of all the other parts of your areas in life?
It's the biggest thing I would say is more extroversion than anything. Being able to get out there, even though at times, the first couple times, it was scary. There was places I would always go that knew me as Mel, as Zach for so long, and to show up and be like, hey, here's me. Here's who I am. I mean, I went full-time way before I should have, but that's everybody's own personal choice. But I think that helped was as I started to finally love myself more. I cared about myself more. I go to OA, Overeaters Anonymous now. I have not binged or mindlessly ate, that's my abstinence in there, in 16 months. I know exactly why the last day I binged. But finding that love for me, doing self-improvement, like it's helped so much. But I still have so many insecurities. I think artists will always have insecurities, and it doesn't matter if you're trans, straight, whatever. We read our writing and we're like, oh shit, other people might not think that. But also working in development, I know the odds. I know 99% of the time it's going to be a no, even higher than that. But that scares me. And that's partly why I started doing stand-up for a bit, was it allowed me to process some of that pain, but in a funny way. I mean, it's the reason why I can laugh about suicide. It's the reason I can laugh about my orchiectomy coming up next week. It's the pain of laughing about it kind of helps on there. And there's something so surreal of going up there and being so truthful, but doing it in a funny way and having people that can't even relate to it still connecting with it and laughing. The first time I went up ever in front of a pain crowd, the first thing I said got a laugh. It was so surreal.
What was that?
It's so dumb, because you know how comics are coming up and there's music playing. I come up and I'm dancing stupidly because that's how I dance. And I say, I may look like this, but I still dance like a straight privileged white boy. Because that's who I am. I will still always have part of that. I lived for 37 years as a man and projected as a man. I have a joke about suicide. That even though I told my dad this, my new openers I ask if there's any suicide survivors in the audience. And usually one or two people will either clap or a little woo. And I'm like, yeah, I'm also a suicide survivor 2 times. Or as my parents like to remind me, you can't do anything right. Because that's the way we think of our relationships with our parents. We're always constantly trying to please them. But then I turn it on the audience so I can get some sympathy. I'm like, depending on how tonight goes, third time could be a charm. And my parents will finally be proud of me.
He's such a manipulator.
that's what all great writing is. I'm not saying that's great, but that's what performing is giving them something. And I performed at a trans sex club, transgender sex club, where whatever reason they decided to have comics up. So I did comedy while spinning around on a stripper pole, which was fun.
Wow.
And there's a lot about my life and my insecurities of where I was, where I am now. And afterwards, this one woman came up to me and she was just like, you were so real. You were so raw, emotional. And I was like, that's what I'm hoping for, because hopefully through the laughter, some people can learn some things. And it's been great, but it's also helped me get out of my shell. I am starting to write more and more again. I've just been working so damn much as of late, so I can afford to take off up to a month if I want after my surgery this Wednesday.
Right. Right.
So it's just like, but I'm enjoying it. I'm trying to get out there more. I'm trying to get over that fear. I know the rejection, right? So when it happens, I shouldn't feel bad about it.
Right.
But we're human. So anytime we're rejected on anything, even if we know it's something that you can never win, we're still going to feel rejected.
It's part of the game.
Yeah.
Really. How about your parents? How did they feel about
it? So when I finally came out to them, like they knew I was going to therapy during Thanksgiving of 2016. My mom kept asking me, and I was like, I don't know what my diagnosis is. I knew what I thought it was. I hadn't gone to a psychiatrist yet then, so I wanted to make sure I had an official diagnosis, especially with my mom's bipolar. I wanted to, like, when I came out and I told my therapist the very first time I ever said it, I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm transgender, but I hope I'm bipolar like my mom, so I can take pills and nobody will ever know about it.
That's a great line.
You know, because to be able to hide and stay in my hiding zone I was still in, that's where my brain went. Like, I didn't want people to watch me change. I didn't want to go through what could be social isolation. I didn't want to go through possibly losing my parents, who are more conservative and religious. And so that's where I was at. But then I was up there for Christmas. I was up there for about a week. In my mind, that was going to be the last time I ever saw them. I figured once I came out, so my mom kept asking me, what's the diagnosis? What's the diagnosis? And I was like, oh, maybe tomorrow. So just like with my therapist, I waited till 5 minutes before I was supposed to leave. I was like, okay, let me tell you.
Wow.
And anytime I would visit, my mom would always ask, are you dating anybody? And I would always say no. So that's how I led into it. I was like, you know how you always ask, am I dating anybody? And I said, it's hard to date somebody when you don't love yourself. And then I told them, I was like, and I'm trans. It was great. I showed them the video that I watched from Sona that changed my life. They thought I was going to come out as gay. Been there, tried that. Nope, not that.
You took another step up, really.
Yeah. Well, I didn't tell them that part. That's, yeah. Yeah.
Talk about the opposite of placating.
Yeah. And I mean, I was worried to tell them because I was afraid would it trigger my dad into drinking again? Would it trigger a mania episode of my mother? It triggered the opposite end of mania for my mother. I know she took it kind of hard for the next couple days. But, you know, they were still in my life. They were just like, let's work through it. My mom mentioned it to her pastor a little bit into once I started transitioning. And the pastor just asked, are they happy? My mom's like, they are. And the pastor's response, that's all that matters. So they've been very, very, very in there. There's been a little hiccups here and there. 37 years they had a son. So when they say, my mom will be on the phone with me and then she'll be like, oh, your son's on the phone. And then she'll correct herself. Or they'll say the old name. I don't care because they're still in my life. One of the greatest moments of this transition, though, with them was I was going to go out and since I was up there and see some friends and they were going to see me for the first time. I was so nervous because it was also the first time my parents were going to see me in makeup and a dress and a wig, because at that point I was still wearing wigs because my hair was too short and too receding. And I was just so nervous all day. I was so stressed. And as I was putting on my makeup, my dad walked by. And because I posted pictures of dresses I was looking at, my dad's like, well, I'm glad you went with that dress because if it was the other dress, it would have been too short and I wouldn't have been able to let you out. And it melted my heart that I was just like, thank you. You know, it was such a moment where it became real. And extended family's been great. My cousin that just called, you know, that was the first time extended family was going to see me at his wedding. So even in my coming out post that I said, I don't know what I'm going to look like at that point. So if you want me to show up as a man, even though that's 8 months from now, I'll do that. Or placating. But his wife was just like, no, you come as you, whichever way you want to come. So close family, extended family. Me and my sister talk more than we ever have. It's been great. And like I said, I feel bad at times because that's not the norm.
Yeah.
I know so many trans people here in LA that they don't talk to their parents. They don't talk to their brothers and sisters. They've been disowned. They've gone through divorces. That's what it became. Thankfully, I wasn't married because that's a whole nother thing, and I can't speak to that. I understand why some spouses will stay together and the majority don't. I don't know, had I married Christine and then I came out and I transitioned, well, she's not attracted to women. But at this point, what if she still loved me? I don't know. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of adding on things to just besides my parents.
No, I mean, you're definitely a woman of articulation. So.
Oh, a woman that can't shut up.
Hey, stop it.
We talk too much, we blabber on. I get it. It's okay.
What I'm curious about is your father, right? The visual that I get is that, you said he was an alcoholic or is still an alcoholic?
No, he's been clean for a long and sober for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
A stoic kind of guy, right? What was his transition through it? How did he deal with it? How did you both, interact with each other?
He seemed to take it way easier and more accepting right away than my mom, where there was less issues with it. It's hard to say, and I don't want to go too deep into it of like more of the upbringing because that's all therapy stuff and personal stuff. Because we weren't really an emotional family. We weren't a family that hugged or said, I loved you. He's still not that way, but his demeanor, I can tell he's caring. His biggest concern when I came out was because of the rate in which trans women are murdered. And unfortunately, the way I had to put his mind at ease is the main majority is trans women of color. I still have that white privilege. My chance of being murdered is so much lower. Because that was his biggest concern of my child's going to be murdered for being who they are. And that meant a lot to me that's where his mind went to. That somebody's going to kill me. That was his concern. Nothing else. Nothing of I'm not going to get into heaven or that, I'm mentally ill or anything like that. It was just somebody might kill my child for just being who they are.
Wow.
Because we never really had the father-son dynamic because he worked a lot. And then when I was my formative years, since he also commuted, so he had a lot of hours and he commuted, by the time he got home, he was tired and fell asleep.
Right.
Especially after he had a beer or two.
Right.
So.
Definitely stoic. Definitely kept to himself.
Mm-hmm. And that's who I learned a lot of that from. Like also withholding all the emotions or hiding it in something else.
It sounds like his basics were just to protect his family as best as possible.
Yeah, and that's what he did when I was growing up, was just work hard, provide, be that man, and man of few words. But now that he's retired and this big change, it's like, but he also knows it doesn't really affect his life. And in the end, I'm happy.
Yeah.
That's where he's at too, where it's just like, my child is finally happy. My child that was miserable for so long is finally happy. And I see him being more vulnerable and open nowadays. He's getting ready to go into his umpteenth back surgery. We were talking about concerns of too much of anesthesia. Just the other day, where I'm like, he's being vulnerable. Like, that's not the father I know. So I'm glad, even though there was only one big moment in our lives with him drinking that was very, very, very bad. Which I've never really dealt with him on that because he was drunk. probably doesn't realize what he did and what he said. So would I ever tell them? No, why bring that up? I moved on from that moment. And he's still in my life, and he's a far better man now that he doesn't drink. Yeah. He probably wishes with how much back pain he's in, I give him props for not drinking. Right. For having to deal with my mom when she goes into mania, I give him so much props for not drinking. And I feel so bad for being so far away from them where I can't help, but right. He has become, and he's always been a role model to me on there. I mean, there's a very small chance that my father isn't my biological father, which is something I've never really shared publicly. Wow. And when that news came out, he was like, we can get it tested. I was like, no, you're my father. He raised me. Whenever I get 23andMe for all of us, we'll quickly find that out. But no, even if that came out and he wasn't, he's still my father. He's still the man who raised me. Right. He's still the one that was there for me.
Right. Because it was his wisdom and his caring, his time with you that really you felt the support from.
Yeah. I mean, growing up, not as much, but he showed me what it was to work and provide. Yeah. And partly why I was a workaholic for so long, because that's who and what he was.
You know, I'm really curious. So because you're going through this transition, and who knows what's going to happen like after the fact, right? Mm-hmm. How does that affect the way you think, your brain? Because like you said, 37 years of being a man, right? Mm-hmm. And then because you're going through this transition, how does that affect how you not just see yourself, but how you apply yourself to the world?
It's super complex because brain processes do change a little bit. It's interesting of a brain on testosterone versus a brain on estrogen, in the littlest things to the biggest things.
Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, being in development, the way that I come after a script now and read through it and process it is on a wholly different emotional level. Walking near downtown the other night, near what's the park near Alameda and 7th? You know which park?
Not Barnes.
Not
Park.
Barnesdale, but you know which park?
Yeah,
MacArthur Park.
MacArthur, right.
But I was walking several blocks alone, and feeling actually exposed and vulnerable. Like I've lost so much muscle in there, and I pay attention to every which way that there's shadows and listening to all the sounds around me, because somebody sees a woman walking with a purse, just quickly grab it. Attraction to people is not as much on a physical level, and it's more on an emotional level now. And I don't know if it's just more becoming into myself, but when I talk to trans men, women that became men, women that took testosterone to become men because they were men and they're trans men, that they think how I used to think and used to process stuff. It's fascinating, just the littlest things on there. Where even some of my, it's just weird. It's a lot more analytical and emotional, and a lot of my thought process.
I mean, as a person in development, you have to analyze regardless, right?
Correct.
Right. So what's the difference between before and after?
I don't know if it's just because if it is the hormones, or if it's just being more in myself or anything, but it's more empathetic in the read. It's more involved in the characters than it is the plot. The plot is still important, but it is also the character. It is that character journey. Even watching movies and television, it's less on a visual. Like I've given up on Marvel movies because they're just flashes of things. Yeah, they're funny here and there, but I'd rather go watch and cry like I did 5 feet apart. Right, I know I'm turning into a stereotype watching the kids with cystic fibrosis falling in love movie.
No, man.
But it moved me. it's such a weird thing, and I can kind of see that on how my female friends, of how they fall for people versus the men, how what they say why they fall for a person.
Yeah.
I think the internal versus the external. It's a weird feeling that's, even as a writer, is sometimes hard to explain.
You know, I get that, because to me it sounds like that. I'm sorry. What are you? I'm not even gonna say what you just did.
No, I just turned my head. I just turned my head and burped. I'm drinking.
Yeah.
I'm drinking way too much iced tea right now.
Okay, it kind of threw me off. But it's
At least I didn't make it loud on the mic this time.
What's up, everyone? That was the end of part 1 of the Zoey Rose interview. Please stay tuned for part 2 in another episode.